Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I'm your host and CEO of Vitality OET. We are a women's nutrition, health, and fitness company that focuses predominantly on women's hormones, particularly as they start going through perimenopause and onwards. We know that you start experiencing so many changes in this time of your life, whether it be hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, brain fog, or waking around the middle. That seems to have come out of absolutely nowhere, despite you not changing anything. So you go back to those tried and true methods of cutting calories, cutting carbs, doing a bunch of cardio, yet nothing seems to be working. In fact, it feels like you might actually be moving in the opposite direction. But we know now that your body is inherently different now that you've gone through these hormonal changes. So our mission here at Vitality is to really help you understand how your body changes in this time of your life, how to reach those health and fitness goals, feel in control and at home in your body again, and really understand how to take care of this new body of yours. So today, I have the wonderful Coach Kirianna here, and we are talking about cholesterol, all things cholesterol. It's a comment that has been coming up a lot where it's like, man, I've never had this issue and now I've hit perimenopause and I don't know what's happening. So we're going to dive into what's happening, what is cholesterol, how to improve it, why it gets worse, literally everything you need to know. But before we dive into that, I do want to mention we are doing a summer giveaway where one person is going to win a free 3 months of coaching with us. And then we have a limited number of runner-up prizes that include a Vitality branded hoodie, as well as a nice big discount on coaching as well. And again, there are limited spots because we are hitting our cap here, which is crazy. So if you want more information on that, there will be a link in the bio for you, in the show notes here for you. So let's dive right into all things cholesterol. Maybe you've been here, or you've hit perimenopause or gone into full menopause, or maybe it came a little bit later. And not only do you feel out of control with your body from a physical standpoint, right? You don't really know what's going on. You don't feel you have any control, but your blood work is changing too, right? We know blood sugar tends to change. We see cholesterol start to change. And this happens to so many women who enter their menopausal journey. They suddenly start experiencing all these high levels of cholesterol that sometimes seem to really come out of nowhere, like it's been a non-issue up until this point. And not only does that freak you out because you have that cholesterol suddenly changing, but we know that also puts you at a higher risk for heart disease and other issues as we get older. And of course, we're terrified and people want to put us on medications right away, right? So today we're going to first understand what cholesterol is, what might be causing these high levels, especially menopause. And then the most important part is what you can do to help improve those levels. So Kirianna, why don't you take away with what is cholesterol? Everyone's really scared of it, but what is it actually?
All right, let's get into this. The first thing I want to say, Steph, I want to say to everyone is the hoodies are so comfy, you guys. You guys need to get a hoodie. All of the clients who have hoodies, they always are messaging me and they're like, oh my gosh, this hoodie is so comfortable. So if there's any motivation, go get the hoodie. It's amazing. And you'll have to excuse me, I sound a little different today. I am getting over a little bit of a sickness, but let's get into it. What is cholesterol? Now, cholesterol is a fatty substance, otherwise known as a lipid in the body, and it's found in your blood. It's also found in all the cells in your body, and it's made in the liver. Other sources are found in, of course, some foods that we have, which are animal products usually having cholesterol, so like eggs, meat, dairy, that kind of thing. Although you may have heard that cholesterol is maybe bad, some cholesterol is actually really essential for your health, and healthy cholesterol assists your body in making hormones and even specific vitamins and minerals, for example, vitamin D. And vitamin D is really important, as we know, for good health, for strong bones, for a good mood. It's needed for making cell walls, cell tissue, and hormone production, as well as bile acid and digestive support. So as you can see, cholesterol is a really important part of how our body actually functions.
Exactly. And about a quarter to a third of cholesterol is going to be found in your blood as HDL, so high density lipoprotein. HDL cholesterol is known as the good kind of cholesterol, and high levels of HDL cholesterol have been shown some evidence to protect against heart attacks, which is awesome. However, low levels of HDL increase the risk of plaque buildup and heart disease because this may increase the levels of our bad cholesterol, which is LDL. So HDL typically carries cholesterol away from the arteries, redirecting it to the liver where it's eliminated from the body. So the way I like to remember this is HDL, we want high, so H high, low density lipoprotein. So the LDL is the one that we don't want, is low. So we want high HDL, low LDL.
I also think of HDL as like the happy one. So it's the good one because it's H.
That's a good one. See, all these things from like university from like
right?
way long time ago that are just like, that stuck with me forever.
It's always like the kind of, I mean, it's important to us because it's what we talk about a lot, but like, it's always the unimportant stuff. You're like, I have an acronym for that just in case you want to remember it.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about LDL, which is our low density lipoprotein, which is just a different form of cholesterol. This is often referred to as the bad cholesterol. It makes up a lot of our body's cholesterol. So high levels of LDL cholesterol increase the risk of heart disease and stroke. So remember, just like cortisol is really good for us, but too much cortisol for too long is not great for us. It does have negative effects. Same with LDL cholesterol. We do need some, but too much of it is going to substantially increase our risk of heart disease again, and like stroke and things like that. When too much LDL cholesterol circulates in the blood, it will potentially build up in the inner walls of the arteries, and together with other substances can form plaque, which Stephanie had just pointed out that HDL helps to decrease this chance. So as we can see, we have like a little bit of a play between this balance of HDL, which is our good cholesterol, and LDL, which is maybe considered our bad cholesterol in high levels. And just as an aside, plaque is a thick, hard substance that can actually narrow the arteries, limiting the amount of blood that can actually pass through. And that's obviously a problem. Our blood is very important for us to stay alive. As the artery narrows and hardens, then less blood can get through, which can cause a clot. It can cause a blockage to form in the narrowed artery that may lead to the heart or the brain. This could result in obviously long-term effects of heart attack or stroke, which obviously we do not absolutely want. And having this high level of LDL can absolutely increase that risk.
Okay, so I'm going to nerd out a little bit here. I love this stuff so much. My master's was actually in cardiac physiology. I worked in kids that were born with half a heart. I love this stuff. Like cardiac phys has like a very special place in my heart. But I remember taking a course and the professor was talking about plaque and how it like actually builds up like underneath the epithelial lining of your arteries. So it's not like just like this blob in your arteries. It's like actually underneath, and there becomes a rupture and it can come out. And I will never forget that he was like, so the plaque goes underneath the epithelial linings. And so he actually like hid behind the blinds. He's like, so then this plaque just accumulates and then it breaks through. And he like legitimately broke the blinds, like a bit of an eccentric prof that I had, and like pushed his arms through the blinds, wrecked a bunch. He's like, see, then it ruptures and then it can travel and it can clot. And I was like, oh my gosh. But I mean, it's a visual I will, again, never forget. But it was just, yeah. So that's what a plaque in my brain, when someone talks about plaque and like a blockage, that's what happens in my brain. That's what I visualize. And cool thing also, totally an aside, is if there becomes like quite a big blockage in your arteries, as I used to like read all the scans and stuff when I worked in cardiac rehab for a while. And it was so cool to see how your like heart's blood vessels would actually like grow different like vessels off of the main ones to provide blood to the areas that were not getting enough because the blockage was in the way, or like it was like a 70% block or whatever. So it was so cool. You would be able to see these like pictures and scans of hearts where like there are vessels where like in an anatomy textbook, there are no vessels because your body is like so adaptive. It is just so cool. Like I love this stuff so much. But anyways, back to the things that you guys are actually here for. This is just me like nerding out on cool things, what I think is cool. So the next part is triglycerides. They are a form of fat made in your body. They are the most common type of fat in the body and store excess energy from your diet. So elevated triglyceride levels may be the result of being overweight or obese, having diabetes, limited physical activity. Smoking can increase this as well. Excessive alcohol consumption is a big one. A diet that is too high in carbohydrates, especially like highly processed stuff. So, the chips and the chocolate and all those kinds of things. Or, of course, those wonderful hormonal changes. People with high triglycerides often have high total cholesterol levels, including the HDL levels, like high LDL levels, and then low HDL levels. So they flip. We want to have high HDL and low LDL. We see that this gets flipped, and now you have too much of the cholesterol that we don't want and not enough of the cholesterol that we do want. But sometimes it is just going to be high on its own. It doesn't mean that you're going to have those cholesterol levels that coincide with it. This can result in fat buildup within the artery walls, increasing that risk of heart attacks and strokes like we talked about. And as such, many people with heart disease and or diabetes are typically going to have high triglycerides as well.
Yeah, so we just wanted to kind of touch on triglycerides because I think we do see stuff like quite a few clients that come in with high triglycerides along with the high cholesterol, or sometimes just like high triglycerides on its own. However, they are kind of all related from like a clinical standpoint, I guess you could say. Okay, so let's talk about healthy ranges of cholesterol really quickly, and then let's get into what affects cholesterol levels. So obviously, the first thing that I want to note is that different places in the world probably have different healthy ranges, just depending on the research that they kind of abide by. But in general, healthy adults should have around 200 milligrams per deciliter or below of total cholesterol. Our LDL cholesterol should be about less than 100 of the same kind of reading, as well as HDL cholesterol. We want to have above about 40 or 50 for women is usually kind of where we want to go from here. Triglycerides, in general, we do want to have less than about 150 as well. So those are kind of like those healthy ranges that they tend to use on blood work. However, of course, everyone is going to be a little bit different where you are.
Yeah, and like this is the part that can be tricky about like blood work and stuff is like sometimes they measure it differently or they use different like units of measurement and things like that. So when people are like, oh, this is my cholesterol, I'm like, I need to see the paper
we need more context
because it doesn't give us enough information. Okay, so now what affects cholesterol levels in menopause? This is what you guys all want to know. And of course, we're going to tackle hormones first because this is so prevalent, right? So before menopause, plasma LDL levels are lower and HDL cholesterol levels are going to be higher in women compared with men of the same age. However, after menopause, we see LDL levels start to come up. The ones that we want them to be lower, they start to rise, and they commonly exceed those of age-matched men with a shift to smaller, more dense, and potentially more atherogenic particle size, and HDL levels start to decline. So we have an increase in the ones that we don't want, a decrease in the ones that we do want, and the size of those particles are like thicker and more likely to like clot and build up as plaque in your arteries and things like that, whereas before the particle size wouldn't be as big. So even the way the actual cholesterol looks, it becomes more dense and stuff like that. So there's an actual change in what those particles are like, which again, I think very interesting. A lot of you are like panicking. I'm like, this stuff is so cool. So this is thought to be due to the fact that estrogen, of course, that lovely, lovely estrogen, has protective and beneficial effects on cholesterol levels pre-menopause. It works in the liver to help regulate lipid metabolism and maintaining a healthy lipid profile, so breaking it down. So once those estrogen levels start to go down and those protective effects start to go down with it, because those estrogen levels aren't there to really promote that LDL cholesterol can get more out of control. It becomes unchecked because estrogen isn't there to keep levels where we want them to be. However, estrogen isn't the only hormone in the picture that can have that effect. So a recent study out of the University of Pittsburgh has identified a link between a lesser known hormone called AMH and cholesterol levels in midlife women. With this information and in combination with what is known about estrogen, we're hoping that we can get a better picture of cardiovascular risk for people entering menopause and moving forward into the future, which is so hopeful. Again, this just goes to show that we don't have the full picture yet. We have little bits and pieces that are finally starting to come up, but like it's lining up with what we're seeing with women and what we're seeing in the lab work. And now people are finally like taking it a little bit more seriously and studying it, which is amazing. But again, estrogen, you guys, you know, she's a dramatic person, but like she helps us a lot. It's just when she leaves, she leaves. Like she packs up her stuff and leaves nothing behind.
Estrogen's just out of here. Okay, so the next one is saturated fats. So there used to be a lot more of a common train of thought. It is still very common. I do talk to a lot of people that do still have this train of thought. That was kind of like, if the food has cholesterol, it actually will make our cholesterol higher. But that has actually been found to be generally untrue, and dietary cholesterol does not, from what we can see in research, actually contribute to high blood cholesterol or even high triglycerides. Now, from a dietary perspective, a main contributor of high cholesterol is actually eating too many saturated or trans fats. Now, in North America, and I think in largely Europe, trans fats are pretty much banned. So there is a lot of regulation around trans fats. However, high levels of saturated fat intake can still is very positively associated with high levels of cholesterol. So for example, saturated fats are found in like fatty cuts of meat, full fat dairy products, a lot of hyper processed foods, or like what you would consider calorie dense foods, like, you know, let's say pizza, things like that, right? Of course, if you are going to get trans fats, they're often found in packaged snacks or, you know, those packaged desserts. So we're looking at red meat, potentially being high in saturated fat, like the fatty parts of it, full fat dairy, baked goods, fried foods, any kind of tropical oil. So palm oil, coconut oil, also very high in saturated fat, and also butter, very high in saturated fat. Now, important to note here with saturated fats that, again, it's not necessarily the saturated fat that's a problem. It's the amount that we are eating. So I'm not telling you, like, I don't want you to sit here and be like, oh my gosh, I can never eat butter again. This is going to cause my cholesterol to go up. No. We always want to make sure everything is in moderation, but the dosage is kind of what determines like the poison here, right? So making sure that we're not putting butter on everything and then coconut oil for everything and thinking that like, oh, all these fats are so good for me because I'm on a keto diet. The high levels of saturated fats are actually what has been shown to contribute to high cholesterol.
And like a lot of you guys probably were like, oh my gosh, like first thing, I'm not going to eat red meat anymore. No. Protein is still super, super important. If there's anything on that list you're going to reduce, it's going to be your baked goods and sweets and your fried foods first, paying attention to like where you're putting butter and where you're putting like the palm oils and coconut oils before worrying too much about the red meats and stuff. And you can still get those cuts in lean options, right? Like there's lean cuts of pork, there's lean cuts of red meat. You can get extra lean ground beef. So like it, again, like we talked about, it's the dosage. So like don't go cutting out all your proteins. This is super, super important perimenopause. Did a whole podcast on that. But like the first things that you're going to remove are the non-whole foods, right? Or limit, I shouldn't say remove, that you're going to limit or like take in moderation. That's those fried foods, those baked goods, those sweets. I'd rather you give up French fries first over, you know, a steak, right? So just 100%. Do not panic and do not take what we say out of context because this happens a lot. Yes. So I always like to call it out wherever I can see it happening. Yeah, no black and white thinking here. Even for our clients who have like cholesterol worries, which is actually quite a few of them, we actually will get them to like track their saturated fat intake and then we can make realistic goals from there. So it's not about cutting it out completely. It's just about making sure that we can have it in like moderate amounts. Yeah, and like where it's coming from, honestly. Yeah. Okay, so those are the first two things that are affecting your cholesterol levels, right? Is your saturated fat intake and your hormones. And the next one is stress, aka cortisol, my favorite topic, as if we weren't going to touch on this, you guys. Of course, stress is going to have a negative cholesterol effect. Feeling under pressure for a long period of time and like high stress and not sleeping enough and being go can all raise your risk of high cholesterol and even heart disease. stress and heart disease, very, very, very highly correlated, you guys. So high levels of cortisol from long-term stress may be the mechanism behind how stress can increase cortisol. When you're feeling strained and tired and you're not eating enough food and you're exercising like crazy and you're go, go, go and you're stressed out, your body is going to release adrenaline and cortisol, hormones that are used to rev up your heartbeat, right? To sharpen your brain, to help you deal with the problems and get stuff done, that fight or flight response, right? Adrenaline will also trigger the release of triglycerides in your blood. A little bit of stress can be good for you by helping you focus on a challenge in your life or work harder to overcome it, right? But this constant stress that we are in all of the time is a completely different story. If it's a nonstop and lasts for a long time, your stress hormones are going to stay high and put a dangerous strain on your heart and other parts of your body. High levels of cortisol from chronic or long-term stress can cause high blood cholesterol, along with other heart disease risks like high blood pressure, for example. And not only that, but stress can cause the release of inflammatory cytokines in the body, which has been shown to lower our HDL, so our good cholesterol, and increase our LDL, our bad cholesterol. So understanding that, like, even though you're like, oh, I'm not that stressed, if you're working out like crazy, you're not eating enough food, you're go, 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 you're dealing with deadlines and work stress and financial stress, and you're not sleeping enough, and you've got like relationship things going on, you're dealing with grief and trauma, and you're just go, 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 go all the time, that is going to seriously affect your cholesterol levels a ton. And that is something you have to consider, which is why we preach so much on understanding how to, support your body and heal your body and address stress through various different mechanisms, through nutrition and lifestyle, because we can't always remove it, right? But it's really, really, really important to address, because as you can see from like every podcast we've done on every hormone, on every topic, stress contributes. So like, I don't know how else to like shake you guys through the screen or your phone or your headphones or however you're listening. It's really, really important.
Yes. And you guys didn't think that we were going to go a whole podcast not talking about stress, right? Because it does affect everything. It's a problem. But I definitely think, even from what you were saying, Steph, like, I think a lot of people, even if you're not stressed right now, you have to understand that stress response gets really sensitive from like stress in your past. And while stress might not be as inherently high as maybe it used to be, understanding that your stress response has been inherently and unconsciously trained to be more sensitive to like even the smallest things. Not to mention that in combination, as we go into menopause, our stress threshold just goes down a lot. Like, this is a recipe for disaster. Even if we don't feel stressed, our body might be telling us something different. So make sure that you're listening to those side effects or those symptoms that it's kind of telling you. All right, moving on, the one or some other causes of high cholesterol, especially in menopause. One big one that we see is hypothyroidism. So your body actually uses thyroid hormone to get rid of unwanted cholesterol in the system. So when the thyroid isn't functioning properly, cholesterol can actually be an indicator of that. Women with hypothyroidism, which we have to remember substantially increases, hypothyroidism risk increases as we go into menopause. Even these women with hypothyroidism that are medicated may have a more difficult time lowering cholesterol levels than those who have a healthy thyroid. And also, as an aside, Steph, you're going to laugh at this, but you know it, stress is usually the cause of like 99% of all hypothyroid issues, chronic stress over a long period of time. So it's all going back to it.
Yep, and that'll slow down your metabolism. It'll break down your muscle mass. It'll decrease your energy. It'll tank your hormones. Like, just focus on the de-stressing, eat appropriately, like the boring stuff. But like, and it takes time. But this is how we do it, you guys. The next one's actually lack of exercise. So there is such thing as like too much of a good thing, right? Like we see this a lot where women, it's like, hey, we need to like taper this back because your body is not doing well. You're not fueling enough. But if you're doing no exercise, this can really affect your cholesterol levels, because exercise helps your liver health, and healthy muscle are both really associated with lower cholesterol levels because your body's like utilizing stuff more, right? Like you're transporting energy around, your blood flow is like higher, you have more places for your body to utilize energy. So having enough activity is really important. And this can be like even just walking and stuff like that, like just getting our movement in can really help with your cholesterol levels.
Okay, next one is actually poor gut health. So yes, poor gut health or intestinal inflammation can actually contribute to high levels of cholesterol, which is something that a lot of people don't even really think of. So cholesterol is actually reabsorbed and excreted in areas of our gut. So if there's gut inflammation, or let's say you're constipated, chances are you're actually not going to be able to either reabsorb the good cholesterol or actually excrete the bad cholesterol, and it can get reabsorbed. So we see this a lot even with estrogen detoxification too. So if we have any kind of constipation where we don't have bowel movements daily, a lot of these like toxic or bad substances that we don't want in our bodies anymore, that's the reason we're excreting them, they actually can get reabsorbed if they're sitting in your large intestine for long periods of time. And the same goes for cholesterol. So cholesterol is part of that, and that could be contributing to high cholesterol in some people as well.
The next one is smoking and alcohol. So smoking has been shown to significantly increase cholesterol and triglycerides, likely through different inflammatory pathways in the body. And alcohol really impedes our liver function. We did a whole podcast on alcohol. I've done 2 now, actually, for you. So you're going to see that like alcohol really impedes our body's ability to metabolize and break down cholesterol. So because it's harder on our liver and our liver gets so focused on the alcohol breakdowns, that becomes a priority, that then everything else kind of gets on the wayside and our liver function isn't as good. And so we can't break down cholesterol like we normally would, which can cause it to accumulate, right? So this is something as little as 2 to 3 drinks a week in menopausal women. We start seeing issues with liver health, just on some studies and stuff like that we've been seeing. So it's a lot lower than what you could handle before. And then if you like, toss in all these things with like estrogen changing and all then the stress, you can see how it'd be very easy for cholesterol levels to come back up.
Okay, and the next one is age. Sometimes as we get older, our liver just gets less efficient at clearing out cholesterol, which can cause it to accumulate in the blood. However, I would argue that this can be largely prevented with healthy aging and lifestyle practices. So just remembering that just because you're getting older, it doesn't mean that your health has to substantially decline. And it's just going to take a lot more work for us to maintain that good health as we move forward. And especially goes for liver health. Usually, of course, if we are drinking lots of alcohol, like Steph was saying, over long periods of time, your liver is just inherently going to start not being as good at excreting all of these things, right? So making sure that we're really prioritizing, our organ health and our internal health as we get older can largely prevent age being a factor in any of this.
Exactly. And the next one's medications, which again, I saw this like post somewhere. I don't remember who, maybe it was Rachel Shear, that posted like funny how like birth control and like all these other medications were, like introduced and highly used in the last like 30 years or so. And now we have a population of women that are struggling with PCOS and poor health and all these other things that are coming up, and infertility, and birth control and corticosteroids can cause a high cholesterol as a side effect. So again, this is stuff that people weren't realizing until people were aging up, and then we're seeing all of a sudden this spike in things. So that's just something to be aware of. So if you're someone who's on birth control or was on it for a long time or was on corticosteroids for whatever thing that you were dealing with, being aware of like cholesterol being a risk for you. So learning how to manage that in other ways is going to be really important for you.
And the last one that we have here that we want to talk about is just genetics. So sometimes it runs in families. Hypercholesterolemia is a hereditary condition which can involve high cholesterol levels. It can sometimes rise even with a healthy lifestyle, even with plenty of exercise, even with all of the preventative stuff. Now, the thing with hereditary hypercholesterolemia is that sometimes the risk of developing heart attacks or heart disease can be a little bit lower just because it is a genetic factor. And you are still doing a lot of things, obviously, to prevent this if that is something that is genetic. However, if you do have this running in the family, I think it's even more important for you to be making sure that you have their lifestyle factors and your exercise and stuff all in order.
It means you got to be intentional about it, which sucks, but
yeah,
it is what it is. It's not just going to magically get better, right? So I do want to note that this is not an extensive list of factors. This is just like some of the most common ones that we see in the women that we work with. But that's just, a pretty decent list for you guys to kind of start on. And you can probably identify a few things in there. So now we want to talk about how to naturally lower our cholesterol levels outside of medications that your doctor might be recommending. Because statins, like I worked in the health region for quite a few years. And I used to laugh because, I shouldn't say laugh, I would almost roll my eyes a little bit, but it's because as soon as someone comes in with high cholesterol, the initial thing is, oh, here's a statin, right? It's a type of medication. Statins have not so fun side effects. And one of the most common ones is a lot of muscle pain and a lot of aches, which a lot of women were already dealing with coming to me because I was working in the exercise therapy space. And it was making things worse. So I'd always go over their medications, make sure they were still up to date. I tell you, 90% of women that I worked with were like, oh, I stopped taking it. It made me feel horrible. I'm like, okay, so what are we doing to improve your cholesterol levels? And they're like, nothing. And I was like, okay, we need to, if you're not going to do that, we need to come up with some other options for you because, there are risks involved, right, with high cholesterol. So we're going to go over some of those things here for you that you're not wanting to take that medication, right? Which is totally fine. Some people don't like to. So the first one is eating consistently, which all of you are probably like, cortisol and eating consistently, how many times do I have to hear this? Probably every time you listen to this podcast. So consistently eating will lower that stress on your body, and it improves predictability on your body's stress response and your energy output. So this not only helps your metabolism, so your body gets better at burning calories, which is amazing, right? But it helps your body to stay consistent, to be comfortable, and help improve how your internal systems are running inside your body, including the balance of your cholesterol and your triglycerides. So if you're not sure what you're eating right now, it would be a fantastic opportunity for you to track for 2 to 3 days, just to get a feel for where you're at in terms of calories and carbs and protein and fat, because this will help you understand look at the variance. One day, I've had women do this and it's man, I had 1,200 calories one day and then the next day it was 2,000. I'm yeah, it's a huge stress on your body because it doesn't know what it's going to anticipate. But until they actually logged it, they had no idea. So what you can do is log for 2 to 3 days. And honestly, then book a consultation call because we will go over your food intake with you and help you figure out, okay, this is where you're at right now. Go over other symptoms that you're experiencing, your stress levels, digestion, activity, all those things. Help you come out with where you should be, strategies to help you get there so you can start doing this stuff on your own to really optimize that intake and being consistent, because this is one of the things that makes such a huge difference for women. It's crazy. But if you don't know where you're at now, you can't change it, right? So doing a little bit of tracking can go a long way to help you figure out where are you actually, because most of us have no freaking idea.
This is good. What we can measure, we can manage way better, right? And I always tell people, the more objectively we can look at our data, the easier, first of all, you're going to be able to detect patterns and even inconsistencies or where we may need to improve. But it also allows us to make those really, really small changes that are actually the most efficient in where we need to go and how we need to improve, as opposed to when we're just guessing, we have to change a bunch of stuff to try to encompass what might actually be the problem, right? So that being said, for some people, macronutrient balance can also play a huge role in cholesterol improvement as well, on top of eating consistently. Oh, sorry guys. Okay, so lower saturated fats is going to be the first thing that I want to address from a macronutrient perspective. So this means avoiding anything keto adjacent or anything usually low carb. Sorry guys. So low carb, high fat diets are commonly touted as, what we would consider, we have a lot of women coming in that we're told the solution for menopausal women is low carb, high fat, go keto. This is how you lose weight. But not only do moderate carbohydrate intakes actually help reduce cholesterol levels cortisol levels in the body, it can also improve cholesterol levels. So not only does moderate carbohydrate intake actually help us in terms of stress response and reducing stress, which we already know helps to lower cholesterol inherently, it will actually also help lower cholesterol themselves as well, which is kind of like that really, really nice double whammy that we have. So that means usually with the higher carbohydrate intake, we do want to lower our saturated fat intake, typically lowering just like all fats, because people tend to eat higher fat diets, lower carb diets when they, when we talk to them or when they come in. That is substantially probably contributing to the cholesterol issue that you might be having. So making sure we can just lower the overall fats, but especially the saturated fats, increase the carbohydrate intake a little bit, which can also increase fiber, which Steph, you're going to talk about in a second, will be super beneficial for us from a cholesterol standpoint as well.
It will also really help you with like building muscle and also help you with energy and also help you with sleep. Very pro carbs here. This doesn't mean chips and chocolate. We're talking like have a potato, have some rice, like amazing things for you. The next one is to increase your soluble fiber. So soluble fiber can reduce the absorption of bad cholesterol in your bloodstream. So 5 to 10 grams or more of soluble fiber a day will decrease your LDL, the one that we want lower, which is awesome. So oatmeal has soluble fiber, which is going to help reduce that LDL, the one that we want to be low. So it brings that down. Soluble fiber is also going to be found in foods like kidney beans, Brussels sprouts, apples, pears. So if you have some oatmeal, you have some apples or pears, like you're good. Like get those into your diet. And note, those are all carbs, you guys, and they're delicious.
Okay, so and on that note as well, we need to improve our gut health. For some people who we get a lot of clients that come in complaining about bloating or indigestion or constipation. Those are all contributing factors potentially to not only poor gut health and intestinal inflammation, but also potentially high cholesterol levels when we, are going into menopause and we don't have those buffers anymore to help us. So reducing intestinal or any kind of like GI tract inflammation, improving gut function, so improving our motility, which improves our bowel movement frequency, can not only help improve our nutrient absorption, which we also see a lot of. We have a nutrient deficiencies assessment going into our coaching, and we get a lot of symptoms of like poor nutrient absorption, but it will also help support the body's natural detoxification process for cholesterol, because we get rid of cholesterol through our poop. So that is how one way we get rid of excess cholesterol. And if we are not having a regular bowel movement every day, getting rid of those toxins, again, as I said, like there is a very high chance that they could get reabsorbed, which we don't want.
Exactly. So the next one is to increase omega-3 in your foods or through supplementation. So omega-3 fatty acids can reduce your triglycerides. They also help so much with your brain and joint health. They are fantastic for anti-inflammation. Estrogen, when it lowers, we see inflammation comes up because estrogen really helps with inflammation. So omega-3s can really help compensate for that. And omega-3 acids will not affect LDL cholesterol levels, but it can help lower your triglycerides and increase the HDL, the good HDL. Because when in cardiac rehab, at least here in Canada, we always looked at the ratio of HDL to LDL as a good indication. So it'll help move things in your favor that way. But because of those acids, other heart benefits, the American Heart Association recommends eating at least 2 servings of fish a week, baked or grilled, obviously not fried because that's going to bring your saturated fats and trans fats up, right? So for the highest levels of omega-3 fatty acids, you will find those in mackerel, herring, tuna, salmon, and trout.
Now, there are some plant-based sources of omega-3s, but they are, there's much lower levels of omega-3 fatty acids in those. But walnuts, flax seeds, sometimes canola oil or like sunflower oil can also have sources of omega-3. For a lot of people, especially in North America, we will typically recommend like an omega-3 supplement. This could be a good idea for some women, especially in menopause. it is a supplement, again, as I said, we do frequently recommend. North American diets in general are usually over consuming a lot of omega-6 fatty acids. Those omega-6 can outcompete any kind of omega-3 that we tend to eat anyway. And it's a really good idea for us to try to, as Steph was kind of saying with the cholesterol, we want our ratios to be very close or 1-to-1. And unfortunately, with a North American diet, we tend to see a lot more omega-6 and a lot less omega-3. So sometimes the best solution for this, especially in areas where like seafood's not readily available, it's not very good, it takes a long time to get there, it's probably a really good idea to throw in an omega-3 supplement to help improve the ratio, and also, of course, improving our brain health and our joint health along the way, as well as improving that HDL cholesterol, just for more optimal health in general.
The next one is eating whole foods. So eating whole foods the majority of the time improves our cholesterol by ensuring that we're getting a high amount of fiber, micronutrients like vitamins and minerals, and inherently lowering our intake of more saturated fats. As if we're having more whole foods, that means that we're probably having less packaged foods, right? Which are inherently more likely to have more trans and saturated fats in them. The more we can increase the good stuff when it comes to our diet, not that highly processed foods are inherently bad for you, they just don't usually pack that same like nutrient like punch or the fiber that we're looking for. And we need them to, give us the caloric value that you receive versus like, because you can have something that's high calorie, not have a lot of nutrients, but you can have something that's higher in calorie packed with nutrients. So if we're always relying on like the more packaged foods, this is where we can see things kind of slip in the wrong direction. So we are much better off for our macronutrient ratios, for having more whole foods, be better for our gut health, better for getting fiber and getting those nutrients in that we need that are going to help lower those cholesterol levels as well.
Okay, next thing we can do is exercise. So studies show that resistance training helps to lower cholesterol levels significantly. That weight training versus cardio can actually help to lower LDL cholesterol the most. So get into the gym or, get some weights, pick up some heavy stuff, challenge your muscles, put your muscles in a little bit of discomfort. That really does help to significantly increase the balance of cholesterol that we have and really reduce that LDL cholesterol. So exercise has been shown to be so beneficial for cholesterol levels.
Yeah, and back when I was working in cardiac rehab, that was when they were like, this is something I had been like yelling about for a while. I actually got into a couple arguments in my cardiac rehab class about this. But like, I was always pushing like resistance training is really good for cholesterol. It's really good for like improving muscle mass and like resiliency and all these things, right? Blood pressure, heart function, all these things. And then finally, when I was working in cardiac rehab for a bit, they had finally changed the guidelines to actually incorporate resistance training as part of the cardiac rehab program. Because before it was just like walking and cardio and rowing to try and like, get that cardiovascular system up. And then they finally like revamped everything. They finally pushed like to get stronger. It wasn't just like baby weights. It was like learning how to deadlift, learning how to squat. And I was working with people that were in like their 60s and 70s and 80s, and it was amazing. And like they felt so good too, and then got stronger, more mobile. There were so many benefits to it, but because of the cholesterol benefits was when they finally decided like, okay, this should probably be incorporated in cardiac rehab. And I was like, I was so pumped. So the next one is de-stressing. So when you're feeling strained or like, maybe you don't feel it, but your body's still going through the things because you're stressed out. Your body, like we said, is going to release that adrenaline and the cortisol, and it's going to negatively affect your hormones and all of that. So we know a little bit of stress might be good for you, right? From exercise and things like that, but constant stress is not. So learning how to de-stress is going to be really important. And this is going to come from, are you fueling your body enough? Because when we're eating too little, that's a stress on our body. Are we prioritizing our sleep? Because if we're not, that's a stress on our body. And then de-stressing doesn't have to be like booking a massage or a facial or a bubble bath. It can be just 10 minutes a day of like coloring in a coloring book. It could be doing like a Sudoku puzzle or crosswords. It could be just sitting outside with your feet in the grass. Maybe it's doing a little bit of stretching. Like it doesn't have to be this huge, expensive, big commitment thing. It's literally just taking time out of your day, 5 to 10 minutes, to actively bring that heart rate down, bring like something into your life that fills up your cup. Exercise does not count for this. That doesn't bring your heart rate down, right? So we're talking about things that like rejuvenate you and you feel good after. So you're figuring out what that looks like for you. Maybe it's journaling or reading or whatever that might be, right? But it's going to look a little bit different for everyone.
Okay. And then the next one is going to be avoid smoking. This one's pretty self-explanatory. We've already explained why it will increase cholesterol levels. And the other one would be like cut out or majorly reduce alcohol. Now you might think, and Steph, you've talked about this a lot, you might think that that glass of wine at the end of the day or those few drinks on the weekend are pretty quote unquote harmless, but alcohol affects your liver health. And your liver is a primary organ for not only cholesterol detox, but hormone balance and detoxing other toxins out of your body. So we need to make sure that as we age, we're keeping it as healthy as possible. And impeding liver function by drinking alcohol can diminish your body's ability to metabolize cholesterol and cortisol, leaving it to build up. So we want to make sure we're really prioritizing that liver health as we move forward. And usually, honestly, one of the best ways to do that is just not drink so much or cut out alcohol completely, because it's really, unfortunately, we're seeing there's just not really any health benefit to it at this point.
The next one is if you are hypothyroid, to make sure that you stay up to date with your medications, your dosing, and even testing to make sure that get your thyroid tested regularly, because as hormones change, as you're going through perimenopause and menopause and the years after, we can see that like your body adjusts differently to dosages based on like your hormone profiles along the way. So getting tested regularly to make sure that your thyroid hormone is actually where we want it to be is really important. Because we already talked about how like being hypothyroid can predispose you to have higher cholesterol levels.
Now, I do want to touch on HRT here. Now, for some, doing like an oral estrogen can be helpful for lowering cholesterol levels if you feel like your lifestyle changes are actually there and levels still aren't coming down. So like you've done a lot with your lifestyle, you've fixed your exercise, you're eating really consistently, you're lowering your saturated fats, nothing is really working for those cholesterol levels. However, it is really important to note that from a clinical perspective, estrogen replacement therapy, so like estrogen version of HRT, so just estrogen, hasn't actually had the universal beneficial effects that doctors assumed it would. And so basically doctors thought, hey, let's just give estrogen out. Estrogen, like if we replace our natural estrogen with this, let's estradiol or this oral estrogen, it'll fix all of our problems. It's the exact same thing, right? Well, unfortunately, it's not. And so studies are now coming out showing that these assumptions are not necessarily correct and it's not universal. So while it can help some women, there's also a large majority of the women that are taking HRT or taking this estrogen that it actually doesn't help. So it does not improve cholesterol levels universally in the same kind of direction that we kind of assumed that it would. And this kind of goes for the effect of HRT on other symptoms or other functions in the body too. For some women, it is very, very much not universal in terms of like a cure or helping you feel better or improving health outcomes. This is why it's great that more research is now being done on it. So we're actually seeing that maybe, while HRT is really good for a lot of people, it's not good for absolutely everyone. And everyone's body is very different when it comes to the HRT or even how estrogen can help us.
Yeah, there's been quite a few women in our program who were on it and then went off of it and felt better. Yeah. They had like side effects they thought were like just menopause, but it was actually caused by the HRT. So everyone's body is very different. So that's why I just like, if you want to take it and try it, amazing. But if we start seeing things come up, that's where you should question it a little bit and see if like the dosage could be different or the type that you're getting, or if you're doing a patch versus oral versus creams. Like everyone's going to react a little bit differently, right? So it's important just to be aware of that, which is why like we don't push HRT here because we're not doctors, but also it's like it's not appropriate for everyone. So we just like to make sure that we're giving you all the options for you to, have other things that you can do where maybe you can't afford it, or you do have those negative side effects. So there has to be other options, because otherwise that leaves you hopeless and vulnerable and feeling like crap and like, what are you supposed to do? That's not what we want you to feel. We want you to feel empowered and realize there's so much in your control. So the biggest thing with all of this is remember to be patient. And y'all are going to hate me for this, but this is why consistency matters. It takes 3 to 6 months for cholesterol levels to improve on blood testing. So you need to stick with things consistently for 3 to 6 months before you think they aren't helping. Like, that's really what's important there. And staying up to date is important, and getting your blood work done annually, super important. But this is like, you need to stick with it long term because it takes time. Just like when we're looking at like blood sugar changes, it takes 120 plus days before what you're doing shows in your blood work. So like, this is why you need to be consistent for like 3, 4, 5, 6 months before your blood work will actually show that. So very important for you guys to note that.
Okay, so I just want to do a quick aside, Steph. There have been a couple situations with clients, so I just want you guys to all be aware of it too on the podcast. If you are in an active like fat loss phase, as long as it's healthy, you might potentially see a little bit of an uptick in some levels of cholesterol or mostly your triglycerides in blood work if you are in the beginning stages or like within 3 months of the beginning of a fat loss phase. This is very normal because your body actually releases more fatty acids in your blood as you start to burn them and as you start to lose them, right? So just something to be aware of. If you are in an active fat loss phase, it might not actually be the best time to do your blood work because it might give you some like false positives or false high readings because during a fat loss phase, that blood work might look a little bit different from a triglyceride perspective. So just something to note, if you are actively in a fat loss phase, it might be a better idea for you to wait until you're a couple months in or wait until you're done the fat loss phase and like kind of reversing out of it before you do get that blood work redone just to look for improvements.
Context matters, people. This is why we will ask you 17 bajillion questions on a consultation call. Because people are like, you got more? You got more? I'm like, yes, like I need to know, we need to know everything because a number doesn't mean anything without context. It really doesn't. So we'll ask you a bajillion questions. So that's all the things that we have on cholesterol for you today. Be patient. There's so many things that you can do. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Book that consultation call. We're happy to help. And of course, we do have that giveaway running right now for summertime. It is free to apply. Tell us your story. We pick the most deserving person that we feel to win. So make sure that you take some time with that application. Thank you guys so much. Make sure you share this with all of your friends, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.